The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. A dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André, your podcast host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again to another action-packed, fun-filled show. Today is a good one. Today I talk with a legend, someone I've looked up to for a long time in my life. Been a big fan of his work for a very, very long time. And it's funny because I had listened to a podcast, as I mentioned when we talked, that he was featured on called The Movies That Made Me, that Joe Dante and Josh Olson do. And I loved it. I thought he was like, man, this guy knows so much about horror, and he was such a cool part of horror comics and influencing horror concepts into modern comics. And I reached out and never heard back, but then he eventually got to me like a year later. It might have been more than a year, but I was so happy that it worked out because, man, I'm a big fan. And I try not to gush when I talk to people that I deeply love their work of. And I think I did a good job of hiding it as much as I could in this talk. But today I talk with legendary Stephen Bissette, the artist who worked on Swamp Thing with Alan Moore, did the bulk of that series, did the Tyrant Dinosaur series, did the Taboo, that was in Taboo, but through that series did Serialized from Hell, a bunch of other fun stuff. Man, what a legend in comics, a legend in art, and one of my all-time favorite artists. And I was so happy to get a chance to talk to him. I was very grateful for him to come on the show. So I'm gushing now, but I try to keep it in check during the interview. Welcome back. This is the first episode of Season 7, I believe we're at now, of the Graphic Histories Podcast, which is very, very exciting. As you notice, we have the new color scheme. I try to change the colors in the photos to go with the new year. So we're at yellow now, which is a good color, solid color. But this is the first episode of a new season, new year, 2026. So very, very excited to bring you this episode. It's a great way to kick off a new year and lots of great content and episodes coming. Got quite a few interviews lined up, so should be good for a while. Shouldn't have any breaks for a little bit. So very, very pumped. And things are going well. Life is good. I am the new executive director officially of the Marigold Cultural Center in Truro, which is awesome. I'm getting to book shows and do all the fun stuff. Working at Jimmy Flynn concert at the time of me recording this tonight. If you're not familiar with Mr. Flynn, he is a comedic icon in Canada. I believe he's from Newfoundland originally, and does some really, really cool content. Tons of fun stuff, like a legend. He's been I grew up watching VHS tapes of him that my dad had, so that's how far back he goes. Back in the ancient times, in the before times, the long, long ago. But, and also, comic icons from Canada. I got Kevin McDonald coming soon from Kids in the Hall, which is very exciting as well. So just great stuff all around. I'm very happy to do that role and be in that job position. The people there are fantastic, and it's awesome. So very excited about it. But I'm also very, very excited for you to listen to this interview. Stephen only had a window. We could chat for about an hour and a half. So we cover a lot. I mean, I feel like I could have talked to him all day, all night, way longer. But based on the conversation, I think we got the keynotes in of his career, his history, and his way of looking at life, which is kind of one of the most important things to me to have these talks, is just getting an idea for who they are. I'd like to learn more about their past, and something because that informs who they are as a person now. Sometimes we get to do more of that and less, but I feel like just hearing them talk about the things they love, people they love, and the path that led them to where they are today is pretty insightful too. So great conversation about that with Stephen. So here it is, my chat with Stephen Bissette.
I've got, shipping is prohibitive these days. I've got a box I'm going to offer for sale of all the original Gremlin 2's little figures that they sold when the movie was new.
Yeah.
So if it's something you need, let me know. We'll figure something out.
Yeah, so, I think I do need that.
Great. Let's follow up by email. I'll send you photos. But my son and
Sure.
I had a whole box of them, and I'm just clearing out,
Yeah.
finding homes for stuff. Anyway, it's a real pleasure to meet you, and
Yeah.
I'm yours until about 10 minutes of 8. So,
Perfect. No, that's great. I mean, usually it's about an hour anyway. So we
okay, cool,
and
cool.
just casual conversation, as I think I mentioned, we just talk about your life. So obviously you're a fan of film, as I see that wonderful cavalcade of original posters behind you. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. This
Uh,
is 3 of my favorite dinosaur movies: The Giant Behemoth, Gorgo, and 1 Million Years BC, which
classic.
I saw at a matinee when it was brand new. So
Wow.
I want to have a
That's
little backdrop that would be nice for you. So
Oh, well, I appreciate it. Thanks. That's
you're
fantastic.
welcome.
So where are you calling in from?
I am in the heartland of Vermont. I live in central Vermont now. I grew up in northern Vermont. I raised my kids in southern Vermont with my first wife, Marlene, who
Mhm.
we're still good friends with, and my wife, Marge. We've been together 31 years this February,
Oh,
and
wow.
we're now in central Vermont. So
I don't have much of a
I,
sense for Vermont. I've never been to that neck of the woods.
I'd always just driven through.
Yeah.
So we really like it here. The proximity to places we love to go is easier,
Hmm.
and it's a little less weather extreme than northern Vermont was, and the higher altitude in southern Vermont that we
Hmm.
used to live. So
Yeah. Awesome.
all good.
Cool. Well, yeah. Well, I guess what got you started? What were the first comics? What gave you the bug?
Let's see. The bug. I grew up. I grew up where at a time when comics were everywhere.
Mm.
Every mom and pop store, every cigar shop, every pharmacy had a rack or a spinner rack of comics. So they were everywhere. I have an older brother, Rick, who's still alive and with us. He's quite a bit older than I, 6 years. So I grew up with my brother and his friends having comics.
Hmm.
We grew up in a military family, so lots of war comics.
Hmm.
Our
Oh yeah.
Army at War, the Dell Combat series in the '60s. But my favorite, of course, was The War That Time Forgot in Star Spangled War stories, right?
Nice.
Um, but what really got me bit with the bug, as you put it, was when I was 4 years old. My mom took me over to a little shop in Essex Junction, Vermont, when we lived there, and there was on the rack the Classics Illustrated educational series, The World Around Us, and it was the Prehistoric Animals issue, which on the cover had a painting of a Tyrannosaurus Rex fighting a Triceratops. I had to have that comic. And it was a pricey comic for 1959. It was 25 cents,
Oh wow.
but my mom bought it for me, and I brought it home, and I do not ever remember being so fixated on a book or an object in my life before then. I wore the comic out, reading it again and again, and copying the artwork on the pages. And for the first and only time in my life, my mom went back and bought a second copy for me
Oh.
because my copy was falling apart.
Wow, that's so
And it
sweet.
must have happened pretty fast, Andre, because for her to be able to go back and get a second copy,
Yeah.
I mean,
I
it
was gonna
was,
say it must have been like within a month.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
yeah.
exactly,
Wow.
exactly. And that was the comic that did it. And it was particularly the artwork that was signed SJG. Now, I had no idea what that meant when I was a kid,
Mhm.
but I continued to find and see work by the same artist, and it was Sam Glanzman,
Mhm.
and I loved his artwork. Like any kid of that era, I had seen at the local library Charles Knight's uh, illustrations of dinosaurs, the paintings from earlier in the
Mhm.
20th century. And I had also seen Life magazine had done a pictorial called The World Around Us with the Rudolf Zallinger paintings, which were iconic for my generation of prehistoric life forms. And those were reprinted in this massive hardcover book called The World Around Us. And it was, oh no, yeah, I think it was called The World We Live In. And that was in our library as well. So those Zallinger paintings and the Charles Knight paintings blew me away. But But Sam Glanzman's work in that Classics Illustrated special is when I started trying to copy the drawings. There was something about Sam's work right to the present day that looks more alive to me than almost any other cartoonist that drew prehistoric animals. And when I was 7, we had moved to Duxbury, Vermont. When I was 7, next door neighbor, my best friend at that time, Mitch Casey, had a copy of Kona, Monarch of Monster Isle, Kona, not Robert E. Howard's Conan. And he had Kona, Monarch of Monster Isle #2. All the art was by Sam Glanzman, and it is still one of the most fantastic monster comics ever published. And God, I couldn't get enough of it. It was Mitch's copy, and I could never trade him for it. Like I never had a cool enough comic for the trade. But I became obsessed with Kona and Sam Glanzman's work, and that's what really got me going.
Wow.
Of course, there were others too. You know, Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko were doing those pre-Marvel Atlas, you know, Strange Fantasy and Amazing Adventures and Tales of Suspense. I love those. And the War That Time Forgot, it was Ross Andrew and Mike Esposito art of GIs versus dinosaurs. And all that stuff was, you know, on the newsstand every month when I was a kid growing up. And I loved it. That's what got me going.
That's amazing. I love that, like, you're so ingrained in dinosaurs. Like, it's like dinosaurs led you to every single piece of that, which is so cool.
I never outgrew them, man.
Really?
I mean, I'm still, you know, we're about to do a collected hardcover of the 4 issues of Tyrant I did back in the 90s. Nice. So I'm back in, you know, fondling my old dinosaur comics right now because they're having me scan material for the book.
So cool. Oh, I'm definitely checking that out. Yeah, I love what you're saying about like going through and having the comic and reading it until it's gone. Because I feel like depending on where you grew up and I guess what your standing was, you kind of like, I know when I was a kid, I had like, you know, 40 comics that I may have got from my brother, from friends or my parents. And I read them over and over and over and over again. And like, you know, it seems like everything is so quick now and so disposable that like, I don't think the kids have that experience as much anymore, where all they had was like, you know, small ones that they could revisit over and over again as much as they did.
Well, I think so. I think it still works that way. I had Marlene, my first wife Marlene, and I had 2 kids. Our daughter Maya, who's now in her 40s, and our son Danny, who just turned 40 a few weeks ago. And you know, when they were growing up, they had things they would fixate on. And I mentioned the kids because watching kids learn how to read, learn what stories are, repetition is very important to that. So I think kids today probably watch via streaming the same stuff over and over and over. And for adults, it's you know, it's mind destroying because the repetition. But for kids, that's how we learn what stories are. That's how we fall in love with what we fall in love with that comes out of the pop culture around us. And the artifacts are different for every generation, André. But I think the process is the same. And streaming gives this generation an access that we never had. You know, things were on TV once, and you never knew if you'd ever see them again. If it was a primetime show, maybe it would go into reruns and you'd get to see the same episode one more time. But I mean, I really got fixated on movies as a kid. Cinema is my first love, even more than comics. And
we can talk.
And I'll tend to remember everything I see because when I was a kid, you never knew if you'd see it again. So, you know, I really would fixate on what the images were and how they were put together. And, you know, as I got older, understood what editing was and how the continuity of image. And so I think the process is the same. I just think the artifacts change generation to generation.
Yeah. I knew you're a big movie guy. I am too. As I'm a big fan of the movies that made me podcast, and I heard you on that as well. So that was a great episode.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was super fun.
I think I drove Josh and Joe kind of nuts because I had a list, you know, and it's like I had to get them all out there because I figured this is my one shot,
Well,
Um,
especially with your love of the old ones, like Joe Dante can just like rattle off almost every old
oh
movie
yeah.
ever and knows everything about them. Like it's wild as his deep bit of knowledge.
Well, I
Um,
grew up reading Joe. I mean,
yeah,
my favorite monster magazine growing up, which was always hard to find. You never knew when you'd stumble on an issue, was Castle Frankenstein. And Joe Dante and Bob Stewart, Bhob Stewart, were the two writers who taught me how people could write about cinema, how to
mm,
read about cinema,
mm,
and Joe really was one of those reference points growing up because
wow,
his little capsule reviews in Castle Frankenstein were what allowed me to track and find, films by some of my favorite filmmakers like Mario Bava,
nice, yeah.
and it was also their capsule reviews that alerted me to real gems like The Fool Killer from
Mhm.
1965.
He talks about that
It
one a
was the
lot.
Joe Dante and Bob Stewart Castle Frankenstein reviews that got me to see my first Fellini movie, Julia to the Spirits,
Wow.
and track down, Godard's Alphaville
Yep.
because of monster magazines.
Wow. That's
Um,
amazing. I've just
and
started a
Orson Welles, Citizen Kane. I watched it on TV because Calvin T. Beck, the editor publisher of Castle Frankenstein, had this, Charles Foster Kane fixation. And I had to find out what that was about. And so it led me to Citizen Kane. So I really owe, my basic education in cinema to Joe Dante, Bob Stewart, Calvin T. Beck, and Castle Frankenstein.
Wow. I've actually been saving because he talks about the Fool Killer a lot, and I've been kind of saving it um, to like for a nice night that I can watch it because I haven't watched it yet. But I recently saw he was in like the Severance Cellar, which is their version of the Criterion Closet,
Yeah.
and I like copied down all the movies that he has suggested. And a store where I live is a community called Truro, which is right in the middle of Nova Scotia. But
Yep.
Halifax
Yep.
is about an hour away, which is the capital. And so I've gone to the local store up there because they have a much broader group of stores that sell the stuff and picked up quite a few of them. So I'm excited to go through them. But the Fool Killer's one I've been looking at in a while. Uh,
Yeah. The hard part is I try to go to movies with no expectation.
oh, same way. I think that ruins it for
And
most people.
that's how I approach comics and
Yep.
novels. I just try to have no expectation
Hmm.
whatsoever because I really want to experience the work on its own terms.
Hmm.
You know,
I feel
um,
like today's not to get into like a today's generation, but I feel like a lot of people get really hung up on the movie they want it to be in their head, and when it's not
yeah,
that, they just get disappointed. It's like this isn't the perfect movie I've built in my head, and so it
yeah,
sucks. You know,
yeah,
it's
and
like
I think our culture, has cultivated that, and I also, sometimes, and I've taken some heat occasionally for being strident in this. I also feel like sometimes, and pardon my French, like,
no, of course, the way,
what the fuck do you want? It's
yeah,
like, I used to write for a magazine that Tim Paxton and Tony Strauss and Brian Harris and their cronies put together called Monster. It
mhm.
was a print on demand fanzine on Amazon, and I was
Oh,
in all but one issue. And I wrote a piece about the 2011 film Creature, right, which popped up, played for a week, disappeared. It was reviled instantly. And what was fascinating to me is people online who had never seen it were just pissing on it, saying, I would never go see this. And I loved it. It was like a real exploitation film.
nice.
And as with the later George Romero Dead films,
Mhm.
I just wanted to say, well, what do you want?
Yeah.
Like, what do you want? You don't like polished CGI expensive films. And here you are pissing all over these genuine, scrappy, low budget
Hmm.
independents, the kind of movies I love.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you want. Like
Yeah.
you're not fans anymore because you don't seem to be enthused about anything.
Yeah, I said
Um,
I saw a comment, and it was from like someone talking about a certain period in time, which would probably be, I guess, I don't know, 15 years ago, where they're talking about. They said if one thing brought me to like taught me the biggest lesson, it was when that song by Rebecca Black came out Friday that like everyone made fun of, because they
right.
said at that point I realized that people are more interested in hating something than liking something.
That's it.
Far more
That's
passionate
it.
about hating something than liking something. Like you'll go to the end of the earth, talk about how much this fucking teenager's video sucks, but you won't tell someone about the great movie you saw or the other thing that you love. Like
I think we're in a real golden age. I mean, right
Yeah.
now we are in the middle of an
Oh, yes.
incredible golden age of
Agreed.
fantastic comics, incredible graphic novels, fantastic films, and the genre I love most, horror films. It's incredible. I try
Oh,
to
yeah.
see every one,
I
and
agree.
even the bad ones. And there are bad ones.
Oh,
like
yes.
I had a hard time staying awake in a recent movie I went to the theater to see.
Can I say
But
ask which one? It might be the same one I saw.
The second Night at Freddy's. I
didn't get to that one yet.
It did not work for me. And part of it is I'm not a video gamer.
Yeah.
So there were things that occurred in the film that I saw it at my favorite local theater in Springfield, Massachusetts, the Springfield Vermont, the Springfield Cinema. I'm sorry, Chad, that I said Springfield, Massachusetts. Chad is the owner manager. And when I came out, Sophie, who works there, said, "How'd you like it?" Like, she was really enthused. I was like, that didn't work for me at all. And I criticized the story point, and she went, "Oh, well, in the game." And I was like, "Well, how was I supposed to know that?" Right? It's like,
well, you're
part
right,
of taking a work on its own terms is I'm not plugged into the whole pop cultural context of a given work. So sometimes I guess that's my bad. It's a generational thing, but it's also like, if you can't tell the story, what am I paying for? What am I going in for?
I agree. I mean, that's what a lot of comic fans will argue about when they change something in a comic, because but you have to realize they have to appeal to people that haven't read the comic, and maybe people that don't read comics too, right? Like, if they're just going for the comic crowd, you're not going to make enough money to make this $500 million budget.
Not only that, like, we were always careful when we were doing Swamp Thing, and I was always careful when I worked in comics, or I got to work on a couple of franchises. I got to do an Aliens novella for Dark Horse, Aliens Tribes. I always keep in mind, okay, there's going to be a first reader, somebody who doesn't know anything about this. Every issue of Swamp Thing was somebody's first comic. And we always tried to keep that not just in the back of our minds, but always make sure it was a satisfying read in and of itself, regardless if you knew who Swamp Thing was, who Abby was, who Arcane was. It should work as a self-contained story. And it's one of the reasons I've gone to see just about all the superhero movies. But, when I'm sitting through a full half hour of an Avengers feature where they haven't given me the name of the characters who are on the screen, and I don't know who they are. Now, I know who they are because I've read the comic, but it's like, this isn't functional storytelling. And I'm a storyteller more than I am an illustrator, an artist. I mean, even when I'm writing nonfiction, I'm telling you a story, and my nonfiction articles have to function as a satisfying read. So absolutely. Storytelling applies to all of it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, when did you start? Like, how did the career into comics begin? Did you go to school for art, or did you?
No, I gotta go back to Mitch Casey, who's sadly no longer with us. Mitch passed away just about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. Mitch and I were sitting in his front yard. I think we were sitting on his front step, and he folded together a couple pieces of paper, and he's the first person I saw draw a comic. We had both seen, there used to be, we got television out of Poland Spring, Maine, Channel 8, Poland Spring, Maine. WMTW, Poland Spring, Maine, and they had a afternoon movie show called The Early Show, and they had the Warner Brothers TV package. So Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, them, and Mitch and I had both seen them like the day before, or earlier that week. So Mitch drew this little comic, in the order, panel by panel, page by page, drew everything in each panel. And it was Attack of the Giant Tsetse Flies. And I go back to that, André, because I didn't realize people drew comics, right? When you're a kid, pop culture is just sort of part of the soup that's around you. You have a vague idea that adults are doing this.
Yeah.
But what Mitch did, made me realize I could draw my own little comics. So I copied him. I did my own giant insect comic, and we also began doing our own little monster magazines. Now, this is before photocopiers.
Mhm.
So we drew one, and that was it, right? That was the only copy. And as I got older, I mean, Mitch outgrew me. He was a year and a half older, I think, than I was. So he outgrew me. I mean, I still value that friendship because I learned so much and from Mitch. But and I fell in love with movies more than I kind of outgrew some of the comics that were available at that time. And I also started getting into theater, performing theater, once I was hit junior high and was in a larger union school, you know, a number of towns. But there was a problem, right? I figured out, like, within the first year or so, the only cinema available to me and a couple of my friends was 8mm and then Super 8, but it was silent, right? So I couldn't make movies that I had in my head. You also, I figured out early on, like, you had to convince other people to show up to be in your movie, and that was never a reliable plan, right? Like,
Yeah.
people get bored, like, why is your idea the one we're doing, you know, that kind of thing. And doing live theater, musical theater in school, it was a big production. You know, there was an adult who was our director, there was an adult who was our, you know, leading the music, and a lot of money and time went into it. And I realized, like, oh, well, this is what movies would be too, right? Like, you'd have to, like, have money, and you'd have to mobilize all these people. And I kind of went back to comics because all I needed was a piece of paper and a pencil.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the skill yet, but I realized if I kept at it, if I got better, I could maybe start to put some of what was in my head down on paper. There were other steps in this that I'm skipping, André. I had a great creative writing teacher, Carol Collins, when I was in 9th grade, freshman. And Carol really encouraged all of us to write anything. It wasn't like today where, you know, you're under a microscope if you write something violent. I mean, Carol encouraged us to write anything. And by then I had been weaning myself on Ray Bradbury, Richard Matheson, H.P. Lovecraft. I remember once doing a story for Carol where I kept using the word Ichor, I-C-H-O-R. I didn't really know what it was, but it was in a Lovecraft story, and it was really a great word, you know. And that fed my comics. And the real game changer, just as momentous as watching Mitch draw his giant bug comic, my high school art teacher saw one of my sketchbooks and took a big gamble. He brought a comic in a plain brown bag and said, I'm giving this to you, but you can't say where you got it. And it was Zap number 0. It was the first Underground I ever saw.
Oh, wow.
And Robert Crumb's Meatball just blew my mind. You know, I mean, the story Meatball was a metaphor for what Crumb's work did to my head.
Yeah.
And I realized that all the 4-color comics I'd grown up with were like wearing blinders. That these Underground comics made me realize anything I imagined, if I had the skill, I could write and draw and put on paper. And that's when I got serious about wanting to do comics.
Wow.
To answer your specific question, it was the Joe Kubert School. I was a member of the first ever class. That was my inroad into actually beginning to land professional work. Wow. It was thanks to the Kubert School, thanks to Joe Kubert, and thanks to the proximity to New York City. The Kubert School was in New Jersey, so it was a bus ride to get into New York. And dangerous as New York was in the mid-70s, early 80s, you know, I could call a magazine and arrange an interview with an art director. You know, and I went to every magazine that would say yes to my showing up with my portfolio. Some of them I got work from, Heavy Metal, primary among them, thanks to John Workman, the art director at Heavy Metal. Others I just got to visit. You know, I got to go to the High Times office. You know, I didn't get work with them, but
that's
it's cool to go to the High Times office.
That's cool.
National Lampoon, you know, Mad Magazine. My work wasn't compatible with Mad, but going up and seeing the mad offices and getting a tour, you know. So it was really the Kubert School that opened the door. But those were the 3 stages for you. You know, Mitch Casey, when I was a little kid, 5 or 6 years old, drawing a comic. My art teacher, Bill Cathy, giving me my first underground comic. And even growing up in northern Vermont, I mean, it was really rural where I lived, André, much like where you are.
Yeah.
There were still places to buy underground comics back then because there were head shops in Burlington, right?
Yeah.
The big town in northern Vermont. And there were a couple of Vermont bookstores, one in Waitsfield, Vermont, one in Burlington, that had a rack of underground comics. And once I ordered from Bud Plant, he had a mail order catalog. We had a family store and I had to work in the family store. So I had disposable income. I'd get a Bud Plant catalog and I would order every single comic book and zine that Bud had listed in that issue because I could afford it. And it was opening this whole new world to me, you know. Greg Irons was my favorite underground cartoonist. His horror work in comics like Skull and Slow Death. And then going to the Kubert School, you know.
I mean, that first year of being in the Kubert School must have been very interesting because, I mean, obviously he was who he was and established a school. But like, was it the polished thing that it is known as today, or was there still like some growing? No. Okay.
It was the first year. It was a brand new school.
Yeah.
Now I had just come out of 2 years at Johnson State College where I wanted to take art, but I ended up having to take theater because Johnson State was Vermont State College. It was very small, 500 students on the campus. So as a freshman, you got last pick of classes.
Okay.
But I ended up working under the head of the art department was a gentleman named Peter Heller, really serious painter. He challenged me and allowed me to do an independent study. And while I was at Johnson, my buddy Tim Varick had an extra $200 and liked what he saw in my sketchbook. And he said, if you want to do a comic, I'll pay for the printing. And I bring that up because that comic, which was called Abyss, that we printed at Johnson State College at Johnson Press, was my folio that got me into Joe's school. And the school was brand new. I don't know if that would have gotten me in later years, André, but it was brand new. It was brand new to Joe. It was brand new to Muriel Kubert, who was the administrator at the school, Joe's wife. And it was an experiment. Like, they didn't know if it was going to work. And we were like, you know, newbies. And our class was like 21 students.
Wow.
And 17 of us were able to come back second year. It was a 2-year program. And so it was really rough and ready. But Joe was there. Like, his drawing studio was in the school the first year.
Oh, wow.
Right? Same building.
Yeah. Wow.
So we really felt almost like, at times, like you were in an apprenticeship program as much as you were a classroom.
Wow. That's
and those of us who, you know, Rick Veach, still one of my best friends, laughs about this. If you stayed up on your assignments, well, Rick always says, Bissette, you were always late. But I was up enough on my assignments that I was able to get on Joe's work program, as was Rick Beach and our classmates like Ron Zalmy and Rick Taylor and Tom Yates and Kara Sherman, Torino. I got to work on those Heroes World catalogs with all the superhero tchotchkes in them.
Oh yeah,
that was one of the jobs that came through. We got jobs pasting up. We would get photo stats of old DC, like Silver Age and Golden Age comic stories, and we would have to cut and paste and reformat them according to Joe Kubert's instructions for this paperback series that New American Library was doing. So, you know, we're cutting and pasting Wonder Woman stories and reformatting them so they'd fit in a little paperback format. And then, you know, we got, if our work was up to par in terms of Joe's criteria, we started being able to do backup stories for Sergeant Rock, which was the war comic that Joe Kubert edited. And that was one of the comics I mentioned earlier that I grew up with, that my older brother and his buddies had. So here I am, drawing and sometimes writing and drawing little short, 4 to 8 page stories for the back of Sergeant Rock. And that was my first foot into working professionally. But Joe was more than a teacher or an employer to us. For some of us, I mean, for me, Joe was a real mentor, and for a number of years, like a second father. My dad loved Joe.
Oh,
I
so
fought
sweet.
I fought with my dad for 21 years about what I wanted to do with my life. It made no sense to him. And the second he met Joe Kubert and they shook hands, it was okay. My dad was fine with it, right?
Yeah. I think
Joe was Joe.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think parents need to see that, like, oh, this is a normal, stable guy that's making a career in this industry. So my son or daughter could be that too.
Well,
It's
not only that, Joe had been in the military.
right, of course, yeah.
Okay, that was important to my dad.
Mm.
Joe had like 5 kids.
Mhm.
Oh, you can raise a family as a cartoonist.
Yeah.
Everything about Joe made what I wanted to do in my life believable to my father for the first time ever.
Wow.
Ever.
That's a great gift, especially as an
Oh,
artist
it was.
with
I
a
mean,
parent that doesn't
gift,
understand.
you got it. I mean,
Yeah.
Joe, that was one of many gifts that Joe gave me and many of us there. Rick Veach, Joe and Muriel bent over backwards to make sure that Rick could attend the school when all the odds were against him. And there we were with meeting each other for the first time, and it's like we were all from different places, different backgrounds, different ages. Our oldest classmate, Ben Ruiz, was like in his 50s. Had studied under Bern Hogarth, had attended, had taken drawing classes from Bern Hogarth in New York City. And Ben was as much a teacher as any of our teachers. And yet he was our classmate. We were peers as well. So it was really a remarkable experience. And our instructors, André, were people like Dick Giordano, Lee Elias, Rick Estrada, veteran cartoonists, and the younger instructors like Kelly Harris. Kelly Harris taught us production. She had worked, professionally doing book design and production work. And her husband at the time, Jack Harris, was an editor up at DC Comics. So everything about the adults we were interfacing with day to day was steeped in the real world comic book industry. Going way back. I mean, Joe had started in the golden age when he was pre-teenager. And we also had a mentor at the school. I mentioned Joe Kubert being a personal mentor, but Joe had a mentor, and it was one of his first publishers. And he kind of was the secret, funder of the school. He had found the Baker Mansion where the school was set and everything. Harry Chesler by name. And he was one of the first comic book publishers back in the 1930s, early 40s. Wow. So we didn't just feel the history that we were suddenly in the continuity of. We were washing, bathing, living in it. It was all around us in the school. And so we also felt like we were part of something right from the first day. And we knew we were part of something big. Like we didn't know if we had a place here or what was going to happen for us, but I think we all felt, the sense of a potential community here, and that it welcomed us. It wanted us to be part of it. So.
Wow. That's a great gift. That's amazing. Wow. So going off from there, where was the next, I know Swamp Thing, of course, was one of the first big hits. What led you to that? Was that?
Oh, well, that was much later. I mean, we started at the Kubert School. The first, day the school opened its doors was late August, early September of 76. Swamp Thing wasn't until 83. So, I went through, 5-6 years of trying to find a way in. And we were trying to get into the comic industry when the whole industry was imploding. I mean, everything was falling apart for, Marvel and DC were hanging on by their fingernails at times. What is now called the DC implosion happened, while we were hoping to get in the door. But there were, new eruptions on the horizon. I thanks to one of my Johnson State College classmates, Jack Vanuker, as a gift, Jack gave me his set of Metal Hurlant, the Franco-Belgian comics magazine that Droulier and Mobius, Jean Giraud, Mobius, Dionnet, all of them had essentially self-published with the Humanoids Associates as their masthead. And so I went to the Kubert School with Metal Hurlant in my bag, like the 6 or 7 issues that existed, thanks to Jack giving them to me. And I turned my classmates onto it. And the reason I mentioned Metal Hurlant is, we were buying National Lampoon off the newsstand. A number of us were National Lampoon readers. Classmates like Ernie Passman, Ernie is a really hilarious guy, and was there to learn gag cartooning. Lampoon announced they were going to do this new magazine called Heavy Metal. And when I saw the first ad in Lampoon, I went, oh my God, that's Metal Hurlant. So I worked up the cojones to reach out and see if I could have the art director look at my art portfolio. And it was John Workman. And he agreed to see me. And he gave me one of my first pro jobs that I hadn't gotten through the Kubert School. And I was very early in the magazine. I sold them my first work in 1977. It was a 1-pager.
No.
And so I got in pretty much on the ground floor of Heavy Metal.
Wow.
I also lucked into Joe would occasionally get oddball jobs in, and he got a reference for a job from Scholastic Publishing. They were starting a brand new magazine called Weird Worlds, and it was because Star Wars had been such a hit. They decided they needed a science fiction movie magazine for schools. They already had magazines like Dynamite and Bananas that were sold into schools, and they had comics in those. But they were starting a new magazine called Weird Worlds. And the first issue, the editors were Bob and Jane Stein, and Bob Stein's better known today as R.L. Stein.
I was going to say, I saw you worked with him, and I was curious what that connection was. Okay,
that's it.
Wow.
It. And Bob and Jane had approached, or the art director, Bob Feldges, who was great. I loved Bob Feldges. We're still friends on Facebook. I was either Bob Feldges or Bob and Jane Stein who reached out to the Kubert School. They wanted an original 3-page horror comic to go into the first issue of Weird Worlds. And they scripted it. It was scripted by Bob and Jane. Mm-hmm. And the way they would script, André, is not a typewritten script. It would be a piece of like first grade school newsprint with the little pieces of wood in it, and they would hand draw stick figures and write the comic longhand. And
wow,
that was our script. And Joe Kubert called me into his office and he said, Steve, these people want a horror comic. I think you could do it justice. I'm going to ride you really hard on this, right? Because this is an upscale client. They have excellent printing, better printing than the comic publishers have. And so I did the artwork, and it was a fun story. It was a vampire werewolf story, or actually a fake vampire, real werewolf story.
No.
And my modus operandi was I was one of those kids who had comics taken away from me in school when I was younger, right? So I drew it the way I saw it in my head. I didn't, the stick figures and the crude script. Joe was like, no, draw this like you're drawing it for me, for Joe Kubert, right? So I took it seriously and I drew it, as close as I could to the best Hammer film version of the script possible, right?
As one does. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and it turned out that's just what Bob and Jane wanted. Like Bob was over the moon about it. And I got to do another story. And my name didn't go on it. It was signed by the Joe Kubert School because this was a student job.
Yeah.
But one of the great gifts Joe gave to me is when I graduated, he gave me that gig. Like I got to continue drawing for Weird Worlds.
Wow.
I got to go up to the Scholastic offices and meet Bob and Jane Stein and Bob Feldges. And Joe was handing me a freelance client.
Yeah.
And, coming out of cartooning school,
yeah.
I was 22 years old, 23 years old. man, being handed a client who paid the best page rate and had the best printing, it was incredible gift. And every story Bob and Jane wrote, and they had another writer, Suzanne Lord, who scripted a few. And Suzanne did full script. I would get a typewritten script. Bob and Jane always, it was the stick figures. And they always wanted me to give it my all. Like they wanted it to look like a polished horror comic. That's why they liked working with me. And that was really the foot in the door. So Sergeant Rock and Kubert School work gigs. Then heavy metal, which I got on my own, and the Scholastic work. And I also scored with a Marvel editor. Marvel had a black and white comic magazine line at that time. And Rick Marshall was one of the editors of the black and white magazines. And Rick liked my work and gave me my first gig up at Marvel, which was a Ron Goulart science fiction story called Into the Shop. And that was a tough gig because Marvel Method, I'd read about it, I'd heard of it, a couple of our teachers had talked about it, but you know, I was handed a photocopy of the fantasy and science fiction publication of the Ron Goulart short story Into the Shop, and my instruction was turn this into a 16-page comic story. And that's when I learned that even though Ron Goulart's name was going to go on the published story as script writer, that's when I learned that under the Marvel Method, you're writing and drawing the story. Ron Goulart did the dialogue over my artwork, but I had to deliver fully rendered, finished pages of art, and then it was dialogue.
Wow. That's crazy. I know, like, you when people get into the conversation about the Stan Lee, Kirby, who created what, you know, or the Ditko and all that sort of stuff, there's a lot of that because that was the Marvel Method, like who was really doing all of that. And I know it's amazing to hear that it really was as straightforward as that in many examples. So,
well, and also, you know, Stan Lee always, and I've got an axe to grind in this one. Stan Lee always maintained, oh, I had the idea. Well, go online after we talk and look up at the U.S. government website for copyright law, what does copyright mean? And they spell right out that you cannot copyright an idea.
No.
You can only copyright the expression of the idea. And until Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby, Don Heck, Gene Colan, you know, took whatever the hell it was Stan Lee gave them, often it sounds like it was a verbal story pitch.
Yeah.
They were making those characters into those characters. And I never, you know, I've worked Marvel Method a number of times, including voluntarily. You know, when Rick Veitch and I got the invitation from Jim Valentino to do a comic series for Image Comics back in 1992, that what Jim really wanted was Alan Moore. It's just they didn't know Alan Moore, but they knew we knew Alan Moore. And Alan was too busy. He was swamped with work that was not bringing in adequate revenue because he was in the middle of projects, right? He was serializing From Hell in Taboo, which I was the editor and publisher on. He was serializing another work for another publisher. He was writing his first novel, but it was going to take a couple of years to write. So Rick and I said, well, why don't we work Marvel Method, Alan? You don't have to write a script. Like, work up a plot. You can call us on the phone. We'll take notes, and then we'll draw the pages. And by this time, we all had fax machines. So we would fax him photocopies of our pages, and Alan would dialogue it. And it made it viable for Alan to take on the gig, right?
Wow.
It wasn't the workload that all the other projects were. So the Marvel Method, I mean, I've worked under it under all circumstances, and I can tell you right now, André, you know, whoever has the idea is not the creator working Marvel Method.
Yeah, I agree. It's easy to say.
It really is the artists that are doing the storytelling. They're breaking it down into script form. That's how it worked.
Oh,
whenever I did DC work, it was always a full script. Bob Kanigher, Archie Goodwin, and Alan Moore on Swamp Thing. Those are full scripts. They were writing the comics. They were giving us how many panels a page, how were they seeing the page. We might deviate from that, but they were doing the heavy lifting that the Marvel writers never had to do.
Wow, that's amazing. Was that? Can you comment on what project that was? Was that the 1963 project or?
that you
Which
worked on?
project?
The image one where you had done
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
1963, the 6 issues that we completed. And that was Rick and I were working very close with Alan. We invited in compadres to do the inks and the colors and in some cases lettering, although Rick Beach did a lot of lettering for the
Yeah,
series.
I love that series. It's really cool.
It was a blast. It was a
Yeah.
lot of hard work, but it was a blast.
I think I
And
read somewhere you have the rights to the Fury character, right? Is that correct?
Alan Moore, I did an interview for the Comics Journal that Alan took umbrage with, and he exiled me from his life.
Oh,
And
I'm sorry.
after about a year and a half, I reached out to Rick. Alan, I wasn't allowed to communicate with, and I said, well, given circumstances, we should probably divvy up this property.
Mhm.
And it was Alan's decision what I ended up with. So I ended up legally owning the Fury, the Hypernaut, and N-Man. The only two I felt I had any moral claim to were Fury and N-Man because I designed them.
Yeah.
Alan's description of the characters wasn't what we went with. It was my designs that Alan liked and we went with. But Hypernaut, Alan designed, he did a great drawing of the character, and that's what I worked from.
Yeah.
But Alan said, no, I want Steve to have these 3. And I also own the ancillary characters that were unique to those 3.
Okay.
So, N-Man's girlfriend and Sky Solo in the Fury and so on. I've got those. And there was one title I was given, which was Tales. I wanted Tales from Beyond, but I got Tales of the Uncanny was the title they gave. So we legally divided it. We signed contracts, and Rick and Alan co-own all the rest, and I completely own my little set of characters.
Oh, that's really cool. Well, I guess eventually, I guess we're getting to the Swamp Thing part of your career. How exactly did that come about? Was it because you were working on the book before Alan Moore came on, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We got the gig because of our buddy Tom Yates, who was one of our classmates from Kubert School.
Yep.
Tom was the original artist on the Saga of the Swamp Thing, which was the revival of the series in the wake of the Wes Craven film Swamp Thing from 1981.
Right. Well, I forgot about that. That was kind of what brought it back to the forefront, is that movie.
Yeah, like DC had given up. DC had given up on Swamp Thing. Prior to that, the last appearances of Swamp Thing was in Challengers of the Unknown and a World's Finest crossover with Superman. They didn't know what to do with the character anymore. They'd really lost it with the character, and so they sold all the rights to the producers, Melniker and Uslan, who made the Swamp Thing film, and who also produced the Tim Burton Batman film. It was part of the package deal.
Oh, wow.
That they got Swamp Thing as well.
They got one good thing out of that.
The Wes Craven film is what kicked everything off. So Tom Yates was the artist, and Tom was doing everything, pencils and inks.
Yeah.
And that's a huge workload, right, on a regular comic. And so right from issue 1 and 2, Rick Veitch and John Totleben at Tom's invite were kind of pitching in. And then when I would be visiting New Jersey, I'd moved back to my home state of Vermont. If I was visiting New Jersey and Tom was working on an issue, Tom would say, hey, could you help me with this panel and so on. And Tom asked me to lay out an entire issue. It was Swamp Thing, Saga of the Swamp Thing #8. And he wanted me to do it because it was an issue set on an island where there were dinosaurs and King Kong, right? He was like, oh, Steve will love this. Tom knows me very well. And
I just love the through line of dinosaurs. It's so good.
Oh, yeah. And I did the layouts on that issue. And so that's when I started, being part of the team that was helping Tom make the deadlines, because the deadlines were grueling. According to Tom, and later Len Wein, who was my editor, John Totleben my editor when we got the series, the book started behind schedule because of a scheduling kerfuffle, and I don't think I ever knew whether it was tied to the film release or not. But the book started behind the 8 ball, and we were always behind the 8 ball. And it takes me 5 weeks to pencil a monthly comic. Do the math. I was always behind. So Tom Tom really wants to draw adventure comics.
Mhm.
That was why Tom wanted to be in comics, right? He wanted to draw Tarzan and Zorro and Prince Valiant. Well, he's ended up drawing Tarzan and Zorro and Prince. He's doing Prince Valiant right now for the
Right.
newspapers, and
Which was
and
created by a Nova Scotian. So,
yeah, exactly,
yeah. So,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. I mean,
One of our claims to fame.
we owe so much to Canada. I mean,
Yeah.
I wrote a 700-page book on David Cronenberg's The Brood, so all honor to you, Andre. So,
And I think I have this in my. Is it still available to buy
I hope so.
on Amazon or in any
It's
of those
from
places?
It's from PS Publishing. It's part of the Midnight Movie Monograph series. I wrote a
think
book.
I think it's in my cart on Facebook. I
Oh
totally didn't
man,
even put that together. That's hilarious.
700 pages on The
Yeah,
Brood.
I love
Yeah,
that movie.
That's me. I love that movie too.
It's
It's
the
my
greatest
favorite
divorce
comic book.
movie ever made.
Huh?
Greatest divorce movie ever made.
Oh God, no. I think it's Cronenberg's best film, and it scared the living shit out of me when I saw it brand new. I think it's an incredible movie. So,
Oh, that's amazing.
and so Tom decided he was going to leave the series, and I brought up Tom wanting to draw adventure comics because he said yes to the Swamp Thing gig because he thought, oh, we'll swim in the swamps, and that's kind of like drawing the jungle.
Mhm.
And Marty Pasco, the writer, in the first issue, took Swamp Thing out of the swamps. Tom almost never got to draw the Louisiana Bayou.
Mm.
And he let John Totleben had been helping. John was another Kubert School classmate. He was in the second class that came in. He arrived in the fall of '77 when we were starting our senior year.
Oh, okay.
John became an instant close friend with all of us, and John had been helping Tom, starting with number 2, Saga the Swamp Thing #2. And so Tom let us know he was going to be leaving the book, that he wanted to wrap it up and be done with issue 15. And he suggested to John and I, he said, you guys should try out for this gig. And our classmate, Tim Truman, was working for TSR, Dungeons and Dragons. And Tim got the job to supervise like a week-long sweatshop of his cartoonist buddies designing these plastic Dungeon and Dragon figures that they needed designs for. And so John and I were part of that sweatshop. We stayed at a Holiday Inn in New Jersey for a week. And during the daylight hours, we were in the room with Tim Truman and our buddies, Ron Randall, Rick Beach, Tom Yates, Jan Dursema, Tom Mandrake. All these people were classmates of ours who had graduated from Kubert School. And we jammed on, drawing multiple views, front, back, side views of these toys based on the D&D figures. But at night, John and I would go up to one of our rooms and we worked on our pages for Swamp Thing, our audition pages. And we did 2 sets. We did a set where John penciled and I inked, and we did a set where I penciled and John inked. And at the end of the week, we gave them to Tom. And we had also done some 1-page portraits of some of the Swamp Thing characters, the villains and the monsters. And a couple characters DC owned that we wanted to have in Swamp Thing, like Jack Kirby's The Demon. And we gave it all to Tom at the end of the week. He brought it up to the DC offices to Len. Len took a look at it and decided we were the art team that was going to take over the book.
That's so cool.
And he looked at our work and he said, right, Steve, you're the better storyteller and you've got a better sense of page design. You're the penciler. John, your inks are gorgeous. You're the inker. And so that was it. We got the job. And our first issue was, we were still working with Marty Pasco, who had been writing the series since issue 1 in 1982, 81, 82. And issue 16 was our first issue.
Wow. So, because it didn't really hit its horror stride until Moore took over, but I was always curious because like it opens in the first issue, is it 19? Where it's established, it just plays off what happened previously where Swamp Thing died.
Right.
Now, was that like Moore said coming into it, this is how I want it approached, or was that already a decision made and he had to pick it up and go from what he wanted to do from there?
No, it's more interesting than that, actually. It was issue 21. Issue
21,
20
yes.
was the issue that John Totleben redrew and inked Dan Day's pencils, another
Right.
Canadian cartoonist,
Yeah.
right? Brother of the great Gene Day.
Uh-huh.
And that was Alan's first issue, Swamp Thing 20. So Alan had to write the issue that would kind of end the Marty Pasco run
Okay.
and kill Swamp Thing. And then issue 21 was the first issue where it was the new art team working with Alan. It was me, Rick Veitch, John Totleben, and Alan Moore. And so here's how it worked. John Totleben, when we met John as a student at the Kubert School, he was in love with Swamp Thing. I mean, I remember classmates like Tom Yates who loved Bernie Wrightson's work, and all of us were into Wrightson, but not like Tom was. And when John Totleben shows up, he's even more into Bernie Wrightson, specifically really loves the character and the comic series of Swamp Thing. And it was John who had done a drawing a couple of years before any of us were working on Swamp Thing. John had done a drawing of Swamp Thing in the swamp looking kind of like he's gasping. He looked kind of pained. And John was arguing, you know, he shouldn't be like this guy covered with mud. He should be like a plant, you know, like he's entirely made of moss and bugs live in him. And, you know, like that's what he should be. And Tom Yates showed that drawing to Len Wein at some point. Len thought it was too radical. If I'm remembering what Tom related to us, it was, you know, quote, too radical, unquote. Well, either Len had a change of mind or he respected Alan so much when he invited Alan to take over the book. Remember, when Len made that phone call to Alan Moore, when Len and Marty Pasco were old friends, and when Marty said, I'm going to leave the book, like I can make more money writing for Saturday morning animation, which was a big industry in California at that time, Saturday morning cartoons. And a lot of comic writers. Later on, Len ended up writing for Saturday morning cartoons. Len, as editor and co-creator of Swamp Thing, had a problem. Like, who do I get? And like John Totleben, Rick Veitch, and I, Len had been reading Warrior magazine, right, out of the UK. And that's where Marvel Man and V for Vendetta were originally serialized. And we didn't know that this was going to happen. You know, when Len called us meaning John Totleben and I, to say, you're going to be working with a new writer. You've never heard of him. He's Alan Moore. We were like, Alan Moore, holy shit. Because I have every issue of Warrior that I bought, you know, from a comic shop in New Jersey as they made their way over to the United States.
Wow.
And so we knew what Alan's work had been up to that point, and Alan had transformed what was possible with superheroes with Marvel Man. Like we were reading it, we recognized it immediately, like, wow, this is a game changer. This is revelatory. And V for Vendetta was like, you know, non-genre. It was its own thing. It was, you know, I recognized it as the kind of dystopian science fiction I'd grown up reading. But in terms of comics, there was nothing else like V for Vendetta. And David Lloyd's artwork just blew me away. I'd never seen anything like it. Alex Toth was maybe the closest I'd seen.
Oh, yeah. I can see that.
So when Len Wein called us, Len was kind of taken aback because he thought he was giving us, you know, new information. We were like, holy shit, Alan Moore. Can you give us his address? Right. Now, this is before there was no email. Phone calls from the United States to England were prohibitively expensive. This is when AT&T had a lock on everything. And so we started writing letters. And the first letter we got, and Alan wrote like these amazing letters. All of our letters to each back and forth would be like, you know, 4 to 10 pages. You know, we were, and Alan spelled out what he wanted to do with Swamp Thing, and it was exactly what John Totleben had been talking about a few years earlier.
Wow.
And because it came from Alan, Len was okay with it. And it was issue 21, you know, the anatomy lesson, which I still think is probably the best comic I ever had a hand in in any capacity.
I want to talk to you about that. I think as far as, I mean, you're a big horror fan, so you understand.
I'm a huge horror fan.
Yeah, I am as well. So the idea that, like, and I think true horror fans realize that horror and comedy are like
Oh yeah,
they're cousins. They're
they're
little,
like
yeah,
this.
exactly. Yeah, they're brothers. Um, and I still think, and I remember when the first time I read the Swamp Thing comic, and I was a bit late to the game because I grew up in a very rural place. I didn't have access to getting all these comics. And when I eventually got older and got to like income, and then could get to places where I could buy the comics, I started trying to catch up and like watch all the things that I read about
Right.
Wizard that I could never get access to, like Watchmen and all that stuff blew my mind. But Swamp Thing was one of them. And I remember audibly laughing in the scene, and I just want to credit you on your skill as an artist in conveying the story. But when when Woodrow walks back into the room, and then Swamp Thing is back alive in the paper, like the whole report implying that he was always a plant. He
Oh
was
yeah,
never
it
a
wasn't
man.
Woodrow. It wasn't Woodrow. It was Sunderland. It was the old
Sunderland.
man
Sorry, Woodrow
Sunderland,
wrote.
right?
Yeah, Woodrow
Right.
wrote the report. Yeah.
Right.
Uh,
And he says, "So you read it? Did you like it?"
Yeah, that panel, because like it's just the like it with the question mark, and then
Yeah, exactly,
the
exactly.
manic insane eyes in the next panel of Swamp Thing just overcome with rage, and then just rips rips the desk out of the way and Hunt
Yeah.
chases him down. It's one of my favorite like horror slash how great a little bit of comedy in your horror can be.
Oh
And
man, that's Alan was a master at that. I mean,
yeah,
you go a few issues later, right? The
yeah,
issue that lost us the comics code. How does Arcane reveal himself to Abby? Just
yeah,
say uncle, right?
yeah,
One word balloon on a double page spread.
yeah.
Yeah, Alan is a master at that kind of writing. And when I got that script from Len Wein, I had short hair back then. I don't
Mhm.
anymore. The hair went up on the back of my neck, and I called Rick Veitch instantly. I was like, Rick, this is what you and I have been talking about comics should be since the day we met. And this guy has nailed it in 22 pages. Like,
Mhm.
it was by far the best comic script I had ever read in my entire life. And it was what Rick and I had been struggling, with stories we wrote, Andrew, and stuff we collaborated on. Like, we had this vision in our head of what comics could be, but we weren't good enough writers to get there.
Mm.
And as far as I'm concerned, very few other writers working in the comic field ever came close. And this one script from Alan in his little, he he and his first wife Phyllis, my first wife Marlene and I went to visit them and stayed with them. They had like a 2-floor flat, and Alan wrote in a corner with a typewriter on a typewriter table and stacks of shit on both sides, and a little blank spot on the wall in front of him where he would tape up or tack up, his little thumbnails of what the panel designs were. He was doing this alchemy,
Hmm.
and it was just, he is a brilliant writer. I just pre-ordered his new novel today, the second installment in that novel series.
Oh yes, I just got that one.
Reading Alan's work, it's like, he's amazing. But that
oh,
moment was so much fun to draw.
yeah,
It was
if I
this
could
is
take
like
if I could take my favorite like moments in comics, that would be in my top 5 for sure. It's one of my. I audibly laughed, like, and in comics it's like it's different when a movie because nothing really surprises you. I guess your eye catches a bit of what's coming, unless it's on the
right.
next page, and then So but just just the look on his face and just the way he says it, and like this is discovering that you are not the person you were. You thought you were. You're not even. You're not even a human anymore. You never were a human. And like the idea, like this, all those emotions, and this like Tony guy just like, I like it.
It was also the emotion I drew on Sunderland's face,
Yeah.
because here's
Oh, yeah.
a man in absolute power, the
Yeah.
Donald Trump of his
Yeah.
fictional universe, and he suddenly realizes he's not top of the food chain.
Yeah.
He's fucking bottom of the food chain.
Yeah.
He's about to die
Yeah.
because Swamp Thing is pissed.
Yeah.
And for me, everything about the page design, the panel design was, how can I express that rage
Mhm.
at the moment that Swamp Thing goes off?
The eyes are so good. It's just it's so good. Oh well, that's so cool. I mean, I actually have a couple of years ago, I think I ordered
I think it was like a sale Christmas or something. I ordered the Alan Moore's not master class, the maestro class, I think, on writing,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
haven't had a chance to go through it yet. I've been meaning. You just reminded me I need to go through that.
Oh,
So
you got to go through
yeah,
it.
I
Yeah.
know
I mean,
it.
I learned so much from, the decade that I was friends and got to work with Alan in a number of capacities. I learned so much from him.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm sorry the friendship didn't continue. Are you allowed to? What did? Can I ask what he took umbrage with? I don't want to dredge
I'm
up
not
any
sure.
old.
I'm
Oh,
not
okay.
sure.
Oh,
Like
you really don't
I
know?
never really knew.
Really?
There's something I talked about in the interview that pissed him off. I think it was because I talked about the business of comics, um, and I did talk about something that some of my writer friends took umbrage with, which was
Mhm.
I pointed out that if you're going to work in comics, the writer needs the artist.
Yeah.
The artist doesn't necessarily need the writer, and it wasn't an ego thing. It was just the fact of the matter, right?
Yeah.
Writers who don't draw. Now Alan is a great cartoonist.
Yeah.
He's written and drawn a number of pieces, but it's a lot of slow work for him to draw.
Hmm.
So he's done more as a writer.
Yeah.
No pun intended with more as a writer.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
But and I think it was that I talked about the business of comics. I
Yeah.
talked about the frustrations with 63,
Hmm.
the fact that the annual never happened, and that was out of my hands and Rick's hands.
Hmm.
I talked about aspects of the publishing of serialized comics in Taboo, and I also talked about we had taken on with Borderlands Press, Tom and Elizabeth Montleone, publishing the scripts to From Hell, and that was a project that happened only because um, Alan needed some income without doing work, without having time to do additional work.
Hmm.
And I suggested, well, what about if you allow your scripts to be published? You've done the work.
Yeah. It's done.
And Eddie Campbell was up for it. Eddie Campbell did a set of new character drawings that would be exclusive to the book of scripts. And Borderlands published the first volume. And we had completed volume 2. It was all laid out. Eddie had done the artwork. The galleys were ready to be proofed. And because no one had remembered when they cut the movie deal for From Hell, no one had remembered
Oh.
that there was this contract with Borderlands to publish the script. And it really came down to, because of the nature of whatever the agreement was with the movie producers, this was suddenly a real dilemma. And in my phone conversation with Tom and Elizabeth Montleone, I was friends with everybody, right?
Yeah.
Alan's a friend, Eddie Campbell's a friend, and still is a friend.
Yeah.
Tom and Elizabeth are friends with me. I said to Tom and Elizabeth, well, I got to tell you something. Our only choice would be to take legal steps against Alan and Eddie, and this is their property. I
Yeah.
would not be able to involve myself in that kind of a proceeding. And we all decided, let's just pull the plug. Like even though the second volume was ready to go to the printer,
Yeah.
Borderlands had paid Alan and Eddie. We just walked away from it.
Yeah.
And I did talk about that in the interview. Now,
No.
Alan never explained to me what he was pissed at. He just cut me
That's a
off.
shame.
And years later, there was a biography written about Alan, and in there, for almost a full page, he says, "I told Steve." Well, we never had that conversation.
Yeah.
I called Alan as soon as mutual friend Neil Gaiman came back from England, and Neil called me and said, "Steve, Alan's really upset."
Mhm.
And the interview had not seen print as yet. I had sent the full manuscript to almost everybody I mentioned in the interview. And I said, look, I'll remove anything you want. I'll revise or change anything you want. Like, I even ran it past my ex-wife, right?
Mhm.
Marlene O'Cotter.
Mhm.
And I never heard from Alan. And when Neil called me, it hadn't been published yet because I was waiting to hear from a couple more people, Kevin Eastman. And Neil told me Alan's upset. So I called Alan, and Alan picked up the phone. He said, right, Steve, I'll keep this short. Don't call me. Don't write me. As far as I'm concerned, it's over, mate. And he hung up. That was it.
Wow.
That's all I was told.
Wow.
I immediately dialed back, and he did not pick up the phone, and that was the end of it.
Wow.
So it was interesting to read the biography and go, oh, that's what Alan. But this is that was like 15 years later.
Yeah.
And all this happened in like 94, 95, and that was it. Now I had already seen, when I first met Alan at UCAC, which was a big London convention, UKAK, that Frank Plowright and a number of other people ran. They invited John Totleben and I out twice. We got to go twice to UCAC. And at the time, there was another cartoonist that Alan had some kind of falling out with. I won't go into it because it's hearsay coming from me.
Yeah, it's no problem.
And I saw, like Alan didn't speak to him. There was no interaction. So I knew after that phone call with Alan, it was done. Like I was exiled from his life because I'd seen, that behavior with another prior collaborator. I'm still really sad about it, André, but I can't change it. I can't fix it. And, I said what I said. I stand by it. I didn't say anything in that interview to Kim Thompson that wasn't true and that I don't stand by. And I'm just sorry.
Yeah.
But, it didn't carry any weight. And we carried on. Like I mentioned to you earlier, I waited a year or two and then, reached out to Rick and said, well, I guess we got to divide the 63 properties. Yeah. And did the best we could. I had to negotiate through a third party because Alan wouldn't communicate directly with me. Rick was stuck in the completely thankless position of monkey in the middle.
Yeah.
But to this day, I mean, I buy everything Alan puts out. I bought every issue of Dodgem Logic, his magazine. I buy his novels. He's a great writer. He's a great creator. I miss him. Yeah. We had a good friendship for 10 years and we worked in a lot of capacities. I think part of the problem, and I did talk about this in the interview, is I learned when I started doing Taboo that creative partnerships change if you're the editor or publisher.
Yeah, 100%.
Like you are now in the employer position. And we all have tapes that we play in our heads from our childhood, our earliest employee relationships. It's not a mistake that the editor who got my best work out of me was a woman, Karen Berger, because I had worked for my father all my life until I was 21. So I have all these fucked up. I mean, I'm as fucked up as anybody on the planet. So, I have all these fucked up tapes that play in my head involving relationships once business is there, because it goes back to those primal templates that are set when I worked for my dad. And with Karen Berger, none of those tapes worked, right? She wasn't my dad, right?
She changed the script.
Karen got my best work out of me. And I talked about that. I talked about how, once I was publishing Taboo, the dynamic changed with even close friends like John Totleben. And in the case of John and I, it didn't end in a split. We just decided at some point, John was more focused on Miracle Man at that point, which is AKA Marvel Man.
Yes.
And we just decided, okay, this was our project originally. John and I created Taboo, but I was the one that loved editing, and I was the one more in love with horror, and I wanted Taboo to really punch a hole in the pop culture. Like, this is what horror comics can be and should be. And it worked. We did 10 issues, and I look at the history of horror comics, and not out of being egotistical, but there's horror comics before Taboo, and there's horror comics after Taboo. And we did show what was possible. And a big part of it were serialized works like From Hell and Lost Girls, Alan and Melinda Gebbie. A lot of it was works like Jeff Nicholson, who wrote and drew Through the Habit Trails. He was the only contributor to Taboo who completed his serialized graphic novel in the 10 issues we published of Taboo. And I think it made a difference. And but John wasn't interested. By the time we were working on Taboo 2, John was just like, Steve, I'm not into this. Like, I don't want to read 100 scripts by prospective writers who are looking for artists.
Yeah.
I was dealing with the slush pile, as they call it in publishing, the pejorative word for unsolicited material that comes in. But a lot of great work was in there. I published a lot of work from people that hadn't been published. Noel Tazone out of Canada, did some wonderful work. We ran a couple of his stories. Work that came in from Europe, from people I'd never heard of. And that was all because I looked at everything that came in,
Wow.
and John just wasn't into it. So John and I, were able to remain friends without the employer-employee thing ever becoming a destructive dynamic. But I think it really hurt me with some people, Alan among them.
Well, that's a shame.
And also, a lot of people in comics, Alan talks very candidly in all his interviews, but took umbrage at my talking candidly in my interview. And to me, I then became a teacher for 15 years at the Center for Cartoon Studies.
I did want. I know we're getting close to the end of time, so I wanted to ask about.
That was incredible. It was one of the best things I could have ever done in my entire life. André, was teaching, and that was an extension to me of being candid in the few interviews I did, like that Comics Journal interview. I felt like this is my chance to explain to the next generation, here's some of the nuts and bolts. Like, it's a real fucking minefield, but if you really want to do it, it's worth doing if you can find your way through the minefield. A lot of it's dumb luck too, like some people, you just don't get the opportunities.
Well, that's the beauty of being an artist, like, and a teacher, is that you can eventually repay, in a way, like, well, what you learned from Kubert, like, you can full circle, bring it back, and then help the next generation of
that's how it felt. I always felt like I never got to repay Joe and Muriel Kubert. Like, there was no way in my lifetime I could repay them. And by the second year I was teaching at the Center for Cartoon Studies, the school was founded by two wonderful people, James Sturm and Michelle Ollie. And James said to me the second year, I don't remember why it came up in conversation, but it was like, I must have said, yeah, I could never pay back Joe. And James said, I'll never forget it. He said, Steve, you pay Joe back every time you walk into our classroom.
Yeah,
like,
he's right.
You're giving to the next, group of cartoonists what Joe gave to you and Rick and Tom and all your classmates. And I realized that was true. I was given a golden opportunity, and if it had been a year or two earlier, I wouldn't have done it. I was working in the video marketplace. I was working in video retail and rental. When I got out of comics, that's what I did for quite a number of years. Also, my kids weren't out of the house yet. Our son Danny hadn't quite come out of high school prior to that. But when James Sturm and Michelle Ollie approached me about, Steve, we want you to teach at CCS. Danny had graduated high school, and I felt like, okay, I can do this now.
Yeah, and probably a good time because the video market went the way it went too, actually. So,
I mean, March of 2005 is when I was let go at the video store.
Yeah,
and by June of 2005, James Sturm was walking me around White River Junction, showing me the building the school was going to be in, and I was like, if you guys want me, I'm on board. And James had invited me in because he had seen me lecture. Back in the late 80s, because of Swamp Thing losing the comics code, I got interested in, where did the code come from? Like, what happened in the early 50s, right? And every history at the time only talked about EC Comics. And when I was doing Swamp Thing, I could trade with dealers artwork, or I could do a cover for their catalog or whatever. And I built a collection, 2 long white boxes of pre-code horror comics, not of EC, because the EC stuff was available to me, right? I still own the Russ Cochran hardcover set of the complete EC. I'd read them all. I understood what EC did. I wanted to read all the other horror comics and a few of the crime comics. Like, what happened 1951 to 1954? Like, what was the shitstorm that led to the code? And as a result, I put together a slide lecture called Journeys into Fear. And by the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, I was presenting it at conventions, usually as a fundraiser for the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. If you came to my lecture, make a donation to the Legal Defense Fund. And that's when Susan Alston was the head honcho at the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. Susan was a friend, and I also by then had a friendship with Dennis Kitchen, who had founded the Comic Book Legal Defense.
Yes, yeah.
In fact, I contributed an illustration plate to the original fundraiser portfolio that was the beginning of the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. So I can honestly say I was there from ground zero.
Wow.
James Sturm saw one of my lectures. We were both at a comic symposium at Bennington College in Bennington, Vermont. And James came and saw my 1 hour boil down of I had short versions, I had long versions.
Is this available online? Because I want to watch this. It sounds really cool.
I did present it online in a form, and
Okay.
I'll send you the link. I think it's still archived online.
You. That'd be awesome.
And but I presented it in Canada at Toronto.
Yeah.
And I presented it at one of the Toronto comic festivals, which later became, that's TCAF now, right?
Yes, yeah, yep.
Yeah, it was pre-TCAF era.
Yeah.
And James Sturm saw my presentation, and right after I gave the lecture, before the next panel started, Mike Mignola was the guest. James corralled me and said, "I need you at the school. Like you're who I need teaching comics history."
That's
and it all came out of that lecture.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
And it was just that perfect conjunction. I was out of the video business, not willingly. I had been let go from the job. I guess it was an amicable split, but I didn't have a say in it. I suddenly wasn't working.
An amicable relieving of your duties.
Yeah, it was like many things in my life, an amicable, non-amicable split. And the novel series I was supposed to be writing for Byron Price for iBooks. They had contracted for me to write 3 Swamp Thing novels.
Oh, wow.
And John Totleben was going to do the illustrations for the books.
Wow.
And Byron Price, we had a contract and everything. And then Byron Price refused to pay the advance. And I said, well, then I'm not writing the novels. Like you put this deal together.
Yeah.
So that was over, and it turned out to be serendipity. Sadly, Byron Price was killed in a car accident a couple of months later. So in a way, it was a good thing that I had already pulled the plug on that. Yeah. And when I got invited to teach at the school, I was available, and it was great, André. It was the best thing I could have done in my entire life.
So
it was an incredible 15 years. And the students and the alum think I'm blowing sunshine up their ass when I say it, but I learned more from the students than I ever could have taught that. I learned so much from being part of that creative community. It was like living in the beehive. It was great. It was incredible.
That's so cool. Well, I know you're out of time. You have somewhere else you need to be, so I want to let you go. Just want to ask if there's anything coming up you want to promote. I know you said that the Tyrant re-release is coming out, which I'm very excited about, by the way. And I noticed Spider Baby Graphics was your imprint, by the way, which I did notice.
Yeah.
Which is a lovely nod to an old fun old film. But aside from that, is there anything else coming out that you wanted to?
I got a bunch of things. I've still self-published Spider Baby Graphics through Amazon Print on Demand. I put out 2 new books back in December, André. A book series called Paleo Pop. The first volume's already out and available. It's called S.R. Bissette's Tyrant Presents Paleo Pop, Volume 1. And it's available on Amazon Canada as well as Amazon US and elsewhere in the world. And I also put out, and that was designed by my friend Tim Paxton, and we're almost done with Volume 2. That'll be out soon. It's a collection of my essays on dinosaur and kaiju films and pop culture. And I also have a brand new print on demand through Amazon sketchbook called In the Mood for Monsters. It's my 3rd sketchbook. The first one was Thoughtful Creatures. The second one was Brooding Creatures. And my friend Mark Mastel edits and curates these sketchbooks. But this 3rd one, In the Mood for Monsters, also has an essay I wrote about why I draw monsters. And it was the favorite piece of writing to my wife, Marjorie. When she read it, she said, well, now I get it. So I dedicated the book to Marjorie. I also have the crowdfunder coming up. It's going to be launched in February for 2 different books that collect Tyrant. One is a art edition, all shot from the original art, scanned from the original art. And the other one is like a definitive edition featuring not just the complete Tyrant, which the art edition has, but almost every other dinosaur comic, anything I ever did, that I had, clearances or owned.
Well, sign me up. I'll be getting one of those for sure.
And I also do a lot of bonus features for Blu-rays. The most recent ones are Kino Cult. I contributed commentary tracks to 2 of their Dan Curtis box sets. I did a commentary track for The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which was shot
amazing.
in Canada
in
1968. And I also did the commentary track for The Picture of Dorian Gray from 1973. Tim Lucas and I, with the Canada connection, also did a bonus video feature for Ilsa, Tigress of Siberia, the notorious Ilsa exploitation film that was shot in Montreal.
Wow.
And I've got a bunch of new work coming out, including from Severin Films, that you'll see later in the year. I did a complete history of Hallmark releasing for them. The company that released Mark of the Devil, Last House on the Left, Twitch of the Death Nerve, all these fucked up horror movies from the 70s. I thoroughly researched and presented like a 3.5-hour audio file to David Gregory at Severin, and he loved it. And they're going to be including it as a bonus feature in whatever the next Hallmark release that they've acquired the rights to. I think it's going to be on Cannibal Man that they're reissuing later this year. The Spanish,
cool. The Faro
film, Cannibal Man.
Wow.
So
that's awesome.
I keep busy. I do keep busy. And before we're done, I just did a brand new article for a magazine called MAQ, Men's Adventure Quarterly. Their next issue is an all Bigfoot issue, and I did a overview of Bigfoot films in the 21st century and Bigfoot comics. And I also have a serialized essay that's been running in Bare Bones magazine, which you can also get on Amazon. It's Bear with an asterisk, BARE Bones. And I've been in the last like 6 issues. John Scolari, the co-editor, I just proofed the layout for an article I did on the Jungle Gym movies that had cryptids in. That'll be in the next issue of Bare Bones. So
this sounds fantastic. Well, I'm a big Blu-ray collector, so those are just Kino Lorber ones, but I have a whole other room in a library.
Well, Gold Ninja, the Canadian Blu-ray label, Gold Ninja. I did a bonus video feature with the curator and proprietor of Gold Ninja for the lost Canadian horror movie Devil Bear from 1929.
Oh, wow.
Gold Ninja was able to clear the rights with the Canadian Film Archive. There was 1 print left of this film. They did the transfer. I've never seen the film. I've long wanted to see it. It's sort of a monster movie. It's sort of a Western, but it was shot in 1929 independently by a community up in northern Canada. And the Devil Bear is a gorilla. But the First Nation people have never seen a gorilla, so they call it the Devil Bear. So it is a man-in-suit gorilla monster movie that was made in Canada in 1929. Sort of the first Canadian horror movie, I guess.
Yeah, I would say I would put it in the right spot. Wow.
So I have a video bonus feature on there where I talk about how much I love men in gorilla suit movies, and we talk about our favorites. So, well, André, this was a lot of fun.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to send you an email with some questions about some of these things, because I want to find a lot of this stuff. So,
bring it on, and I'll also provide you a list of the Blu-rays I've done bonus features for. And if you ever want me on again, just ask. We can do another session.
Dude, I have an idea about something else I want to talk about too, but I'll send that in an email.
Great.
So,
thank
you so much.
André, this was a great pleasure.
It's been an honor.
And great to meet you. And I'll follow up about those gremlins.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thanks again.
Okay, cool. Take care, André. Bye-bye now.
There you have it, my conversation with Stephen Bissette. A great chat with an amazing comic creator that has a lot of really cool projects coming out too, so make sure to check all those out. I'm definitely going to be getting that Tyrant collection. That series is beautiful. As I mentioned, we were talking about dinosaurs and comics and representation. It reminded me of something I didn't get a chance to talk to Stephen about, but way back in the long ago. They used to digest the X-Men comics in these little digested versions, and I used to really love those. And they always had these backup stories. Most of them were based on Ray Bradbury short stories, and they had different artists. I think they were probably reprinted from some other magazine. But one of them, which is one of my favorites, was The Sound of Thunder, which is a time travel kind of story. And I believe the art was done by Richard Corbin, and it was really brightly painted, and it was really, really beautiful. And that's something I always thought about discovering dinosaurs in early comics. And that's one I really, really liked as well. So, if you're into dinosaurs and comics, check out that one. I mean, if you like Corbin's art, which you must if you're a comic fan, it's some of the best stuff ever. Check that out too. And some beautiful, beautiful original work. And glorious dinosaurs. Something I'm sure Stephen would appreciate. So thanks for Stephen, if you're listening, for being on the show. It was a true honor and a blast. Happily talk to him anytime ever again. I've had sort of a rule. I wouldn't call it rule, but just I don't really have people revisit the show that often. Just because I feel like we got a good handle on them. But as time goes on, things change, people change. And it's nice to pick up where they are now. So down the line, I'd be happy to chat with them again. And maybe even do like some updated episodes where I have small conversations with the folks that have new projects and just talk about what the projects are. Because, there's some really, really cool stuff coming down the pipeline for a lot of these artists. So tune in next week for another episode. I don't have it recorded yet, so I'm not going to tell you who it is, but it'll be on social media. Thanks again for tuning in. Welcome to 2026. If you're new to the show, welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. It's been a hell of a ride so far, and it's not over yet. Catch you next week. This program is a proud part of the Swear to Pod Network.